thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Rachel Hayden. I'm the Training and Engagement Officer with the National Biodiversity Data Centre. I just wanted to go through some housekeeping notes before we start. So you might have noticed that your video and camera are off. This is because the webinar will be recorded and it'll be made available later on our website and YouTube channel. If you have any questions, there is a Q&A feature, so please feel free to pop in a question at any point throughout the webinar, and we'll leave time at the end to go through them. We did get some questions ahead of time, so hopefully they'll be addressed in the main presentation, but if not, we'll hopefully look at them towards the end. So I'm really happy to hand over to Anna Navreen, who will give a little introduction to the webinar this morning.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Hi, my name is Owen Navreen and I'm the Director of International and EU Affairs in the National Parks and Wildlife Service. I suppose my main responsibility in relation to Asian hornet is that we are responsible for the transposition of the EU regulations into Irish law. And as such, I suppose it was my desk that it landed on when the call first came in from that an Asian hornet had been sighted in Cork. This is our first significant interaction with the Asian hornet. Yes, there was one in 2021, but this is the first time we've really had to face up and deal with a significant incursion. I'm not a scientist and I'm not an expert, so I am going to very quickly hand over to the scientists and the experts who will bring you through the contingency program, contingency response that we led to this and the successful recovery of 2 Asian hornet nests. So I'm going to hand you over now to John Kelly, who will talk you through in a lot more detail what we did and how we dealt with it. John, over to you.
Good morning, Ola, and thank you, Rachel, as well. And good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us and giving up some of your Saturday morning to talk about Asian hornet. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge all of the partners involved in the Government of Ireland response, the Asian Hornet Management Group, as we termed it, led by NPWS, Aidan at the National Museum of Ireland, partners in the Department of Agriculture, ourselves at the National Biodiversity Data Centre. I also want to acknowledge the funding that has allowed me and my team to support the Ireland's response to Asian hornet, Northern Ireland Environment Agency, the Shared Island Initiative, and the Heritage Council as well. A special thanks to everyone who was involved, and this is just a quick list of some of them. The Irish Pest Control Association supported the control of the nest, the Quaker community of Cork City, who are incredibly hospitable to us and understanding of our work. The people of Cork and Cove as well, Cork City Council, the UK's Animal Plant Health Agency, beekeeping associations across the island of Ireland, University of Galway, and everyone that has reported Asian hornet to the National Biodiversity Data Centre. Without all of these people, we would not be able to have led this response to Asian hornet during 2025. But let's take a step back and familiarise ourselves with the Asian hornet. Of course, with the name like Asian hornet, it is a native range of Asia. Today, it's an invasive species of union concern. So it's recognised as an invasive species right across the European Union. It's also recognised as an invasive species in Northern Ireland and the whole of the UK. Obviously, it's native to Asia, but it's one of 22 species of hornets. In the European Union and Europe, there's only one native hornet, the European hornet. That is not present in Ireland. So we know that we have no other hornets to confuse, that people could potentially confuse the idea of the species with. It is also commonly known as the yellow-legged hornets for the obvious reason where you can see the yellow legs of the hornet. Just to give you a little bit of background of its introduction. So it was first introduced to Europe in 2004, believed to have been a hitchhiker on a pot, possibly a bonsai tree pot, where it was introduced into France. The problem wasn't identified or wasn't quickly understood how big of a problem this species could represent to Europe. So over the years, it spread more and more. It spread very rapidly as well, and you can see the progress this species has made across the European continent. And then in 2025, we have a number of records from Ireland as well. Why are we all concerned about Asian hornet? First of all, the threat to biodiversity and our ecosystems. As a predator of pollinators and native invertebrates, it could potentially drive serious declines in some of these species. There is a human health element. It is a species that obviously can sting people, and if people do disturb the nests in particular, there can be some dramatic consequences. However, I would like to convey the message that it is not a serious threat to people, as you will see from some of the images of us working with Asian hornet. On the continent in Europe, there have been economic impacts. These impacts have been associated with control of the species and also potential impacts on some agricultural sectors in France as well. And of course, we have the impact on honeybees. You can see here the typical hawking behavior of an Asian hornet as it is predating on a honeybee. I'd like everyone to learn how to identify Asian hornet. Obviously, you have the yellow legs that we mentioned earlier on, but of note is this orange segment, the fourth segment, which is very characteristic of an Asian hornet. And that is something that everyone should, who is trying to work with the species, should get to know. It's about 2 to 3 centimeters long, so it is slightly larger than our native wasp. Anyone who's a beekeeper can also potentially see this hawking behavior. Thankfully, during 2025, we have seen none of this behavior in Ireland. So we're very happy that we responded in time before there was any threats or any predation of honey hives. I do want to point out the difference between hornet coloration, so the orange and the yellow of our native wasps. So here you can see native wasp, which is a very distinctive yellow in comparison to the orange color of hornets. Over the next few years, members of the public might see Asian hornet nests. So the Asian hornet nests, Aidan is going to go into more detail about the life cycle of Asian hornet, but here you see the embryo nest and the primary nests of Asian hornet. When the embryo nest is first set up, the queen lays the eggs, and then she is servicing those eggs and feeding those that young brood. Once that brood hatch, the queen then stays in the nest and doesn't leave the nest at that point. Members of the public may see nests like this, but it's important that they look out for what insect is visiting the nest, because our native wasp nests look very similar to these nests as well. Later on in the year, as the life cycle progresses, the secondary nest develops. So the secondary nest will either develop in a different location, potentially up a tree, or it will develop in the same location if the hornet feels that it is a safe place to develop the nests. Here on screen, you will see images, or you will see, sorry, the hornets walking across the nest. And this is very, very, very important. Because looking at what activity is actually happening on the nest itself is critical. It is quite probable that members of the public will confuse an Asian hornet nest with native wasp nests, because they do look very, very similar, as you can see from this image. But there are distinctive differences, and when we get images of wasp nests, we engage with experts such as Aidan at the museum and other experts to ensure that we are correctly identifying them as wasp nests. Some members of the public, in GB in particular so far, have mistaken tree or bird nests in trees, particularly at this time of year, for Asian hornet nests. As Onla said early on, 2025 was not Ireland's first encounter with Asian hornet. In 2021, we had a single individual that was reported by a member of the public from, I believe it was their garage, which is why this record doesn't show up on our mapping system. It wasn't from the wild. We believe that this was a hitchhiker that came in on a vehicle or a piece of cargo and was reported by a member of the public. Aidan at the museum has mounted this individual and taken some amazing photographs, which have been used again and again by the media, helping to raise awareness of this species. This individual was genetically sequenced by University College Cork, and it was identified that it was most likely, it was not a new introduction from China, but most likely an import from France or the UK, and that's really important. However, that first brush with Asian hornet has resulted in a lot of work going on in the background to prepare Ireland for Asian hornet. We commissioned a risk assessment of this species to understand the risk to the island of Ireland. Apologies, an ambulance is passing by my room, or my window. We also, NPWS led on producing new regulations which recognised Asian hornet as an invasive species of union concern in Ireland. Over 2024 and 2025, a lot of work by the data centre and our partners under the Shared Island Biosecurity and Invasive Species Initiative set on preparing the operational requirements to respond to Asian hornet. Okay, so in the background, as part of the Shared Island Biosecurity and Invasive Species Initiative, we were developing a strategic approach to Ireland's response to Asian hornet. We were drawing a lot of lessons from GB, and you might ask, why were we focusing very much on GB? And the reason is they have a lot of, since 2016, they have a lot of encounters with Asian hornet, with a number of incursions each and every year. They have successfully eradicated these incursions for the last 8-9 years, and it is an effective model for us to rely on for what we want to do in Ireland. Equally, the regulatory framework in GB is very similar to Ireland as well, so there are a lot of parallels that we can draw on. But I do want to point out that the success in GB can and has been replicated in Ireland during 2025 and hopefully will again in future years. Over the last number of years as well, there's been a lot more data to understand the risk that Asian hornet pose to the island of Ireland. On your screen, hopefully you can see a screenshot of a study that was published in November of last year, which shows that Ireland is most likely in the suitability zone for this species. So that was a really, really important study that helped inform our response and understanding of the risk of this species to Ireland. During 2025, some of the tracking technology that has previously been in an experimental and development stage really came into fruition. So on your screen, you see the RoboNature tracking technology, which some of you may have seen covered on the news. And as a result of funding by NPWS in partnership with the University of Galway, we now have that technology in Ireland ready to go for future incursions if and when it will be needed. It wasn't required during 2025 because the nests were found before we had a chance to deploy this tracking technology. And that is to be expected. There will be a mixed approach, sometimes relying on this technology and sometimes relying on traditional techniques. We also have this study published in this year showing how important public reporting is to an effective response to Asian hornet. Relying on members of the public to report Asian hornet is going to be a key branch of our response to this species. And that's where we're incredibly grateful to everyone who has reported Asian hornet. And that proved to be the case for both Cork and Cove. Both the initial records came from members of the public reporting to the National Biodiversity Data Centre that they have spotted Asian hornet. It was crucial that both of these records came with a photograph, which then allowed us to verify very quickly that it was indeed an Asian hornet. I'm not going to focus too much on the Cove nest from here on in, because everything that we did in the Cork response was mirrored in the Cove nest. So we're going to very much focus on the Cork nest as our case study for the rest of the session. So what happened when we received that first record of Asian hornet with a verified image? That actually landed on my desk, and I was able to contact and reach out to the recorder, and I was able to, once we were arranged a meeting, we were able to discuss and verify that it was indeed an Asian hornet. At that point, we convened the first meeting of the Asian Hornet Management Group, which was chaired by Ornal Nivereen at NPWS, supported by Aidan as well, and the data centre in Dapham. We alerted beekeepers very, very quickly through their associations that there was a verified record of Asian hornet. Aidan led on the deploying of traps, circulating flyers in the area and talking to businesses to raise awareness locally in Cork. We informed the media as well to raise awareness across the island of Ireland and also locally in Cork. We engaged with Cork City biodiversity officers, and we also put the NPWS conservation rangers on alert. So we now have this verified sighting. Aidan at the museum led the initial response. He met the recorder on site in Cork. He set up a monitoring grid, which followed this tight zone of interest, which is 250-meter radius from the initial sighting. He set up traps very much like what you see here across this zone of interest. Because it could have been a situation that, like what the 2021, where a single individual had hitchhiked its way into Ireland, or as it transpired, a nest. We knew that we had a nest. Aidan also carried out some preliminary surveys of the area, searching for hornet activity and searching for wasp activity. We saw this. We spotted this wasp primary nest, which was abandoned, and Aidan checked this out and brought it back home in the brought it back to his lab at the museum and dissected that out to see if there was any signs of hornet, and we were able to conclude that that was a wasp nest. But you can see that a primary wasp nest is very similar to a primary hornet nest. We also engaged with beekeepers in the area, and we checked out their local hive, one local hive in our zone of interest, to see if there was any hawking behaviour. And we were not able to identify any hawking behaviour during our initial response. 1 week later, came the first confirmed record of Asian hornet caught in one of our traps. This specimen was actually recovered by a member of the Irish Beekeeping Association and reported to myself and Aidan, and that led to the biosecurity alert being issued by National Parks and Wildlife Service for that. Aidan now has that specimen at the museum, and he's worked it up a second mounted specimen as well. It quickly followed that there were a number of additional captures in the area, both in the trap set by us and traps set by beekeepers. So we now knew that there was a nest in the area. How did we go about tracking back to the nest? We relied very much on the methods developed in Jersey and in the UK, which used baited stations like you see here, which is basically shallow dishes filled with either a homemade attractant or a substance called trappet, which drew in Asian hornet and indeed native wasps as well. We set up a small number of those stations in the area. And the reason we set up a small number of stations in the area is because you don't want hornets going to different stations. You want them to come to your feeding station again and again. From that, you're able to mark them with ink or a pen, and then you're able to start timing you're able to watch them fly off to the nest, and you're able to start timing their return. And from that data, you're able to get a general direction and a likely distance to the nest. So we were building up this evidence based over a number of days, led by the NPWS rangers. And on screen here, you can see one of the rangers, Claire Deasy, leading some of this work on the ground in Cork. It took a number of days because hornet activity was slower than you might expect. So it did take a number of days, and you had beekeepers working at their stations, and you had NPWS working at their stations as well. So it took dedication and strategy working through this to identify it. A breakthrough came through NPWS rangers deploying their ecological skills and doing some more surveys of the area, discussing with beekeepers in the area as well, and comparing notes and comparing data to find the nest. Beekeepers and NPWS rangers work together to deploy what's called tinsel tagging, which increases the visibility of hornets as they fly off from you and increases your ability to find the nest. The nest was eventually found on private property. It was in a lovely wooded area, as you can see here, but it was very much a team effort between all organizations and interested stakeholders. It was found 90 meters up a sycamore tree, which created a need to control that nest. It was a great relief to everyone when we found the nest, because we could then move into the control phase of the response. There we go. I'm just going to play a video, hopefully, and hopefully it is playing for you, where you'll be able to see the Asian hornets walking over their nest. So this was, as I said, a large nest high up in a tree, and you can just see the Asian hornets walking through and around the nest. NPWS rangers in the area secured a cherry picker, and then we also brought in an expert from the UK to advise Ireland's first control of Asian hornet. We worked with the Irish Pest Control Association to secure one of these lances, which is called an AR8, which is 8 meters long. And then we put together the team on the cherry picker, and then we're able to safely control that nest. Here you see Owen Breen preparing some of the team, Sam Bailey, there on the ground to control the nest, using the Asian hornet suits and using the safety gloves as you would expect. You can see Sam wearing a hard hat, because with the cherry picker on site, it was a formal work site, and all of this needed to be done carefully and safely without incident. And the team were deployed to the nest, control the nest safely. And then the very next day, they went up and cut down the nest and retrieved the nest. All of this was done under with RTE on site, filming efforts, because we wanted to share the story, we wanted to reassure the public, and we also wanted to keep raising awareness of Asian hornet, so that if there was more out there, people would report it to us here at the data centre. And at this point, I will hand over to Aidan, because Aidan can now hopefully take control and tell us about what happened to the nest once he yes, hopefully. I think you're on. Ready.
Can you hear me, John?
Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. Thanks a million. Yeah, I'm possibly the next slide up. So thanks a million, John. Thanks, Anya. And thanks very much, Rachel, for organising today's webinar, and to everybody who's joining in. And just to also echo all of the thanks that John gave at the start to, in particular, the various communities down in Cork who let the NPWS on their lands and so on to set traps and so on. So my name is Aidan O'Hanlon. I am the entomology curator at the Natural History Museum, the National Museum of Ireland. And today I'm going to be talking about the nests that were recovered by the NPWS team in a bit more detail. It'll still be very brief. I'll give a brief overview of the nest structure and the kinds of information that we get from the nest. So before I do that, I think it might be useful to just talk briefly about the life cycle of the Asian hornet. So can I just get a thumbs up or something that the life cycle slide is visible in people's screens? Great, thanks. Okay, so people will be familiar, as with most insects, the Asian hornet reaches its peak activity in the middle of the summer. But what's interesting about the hornet is that the story of its colony life cycle really begins in the depths of winter. So like other wasps, like other social wasps, the Asian hornet queens hibernate over the winter. This picture on the right is of a European hornet. As John mentioned, that's the only species native to Europe. I couldn't find a picture online of a hibernating Asian hornet queen, but it gives an idea of the kind of situations where you might find a queen overwintering. So they'll be in sheds, garages, Our colleagues in the UK have told us they really commonly find them in barbecues as well. So anywhere where there's a bit of substrate that will buffer them from temperature extremes. The Asian hornet queens, she will have genetic material stored up from mating with males the previous autumn, and this is stored in her body as she hibernates over the winter. So in early spring, this slide was also pointed out by John, that the new queens emerge from hibernation and they set about building a small nest. So at this stage it's called an embryo nest. It's the first stage of the primary nest, only built by the queen, into which she lays up to a dozen or so eggs. Wasps like other, or hornets like other wasps, bees and ants and so on, have this incredible ability whereby they can choose the sex of the offspring as they're laying eggs. So at this stage, any fertilized eggs will give rise to females and any unfertilized eggs will give rise to males. So using the genetic material stored up from the previous autumn, at this stage the queen is only laying fertilized eggs, which will be her daughters, which will be workers. So it's a complicated life cycle. Then in early summer, the workers, who are her daughters, emerge and they take over the nest maintenance care. So the queen is at this stage just an egg-laying machine. And the workers are busy expanding the comb and taking over the duties of caring for larvae, foraging, at this stage nectar and so on. At some stage then in midsummer, the colony gets large enough that it relocates to a secondary nest, and this is the type of nest that we found in the two Cork nests. So typically up a tree 20 meters or so. They can be very large nests, and at this stage the colony is reaching very large numbers of individuals, hundreds or thousands of individual hornets. Then in sort of late summer, early autumn, this is when the hornets are potentially at their ecologically most damaging, because the diet changes. So as John pointed out, thankfully in the 2025 incursions of the hornets in Cork, no hawking behavior, no significant attacks on hives were observed at all, which is brilliant. But this is when they're at their most damaging. And the reason they switch diet and they switch from a carbohydrate heavy diet of, nectar from flowers and so on, to a protein based diet, which is insects, including the honeybee, is because they bring these back to their nests and they feed them to the young, and young that are fed a particularly high protein diet will become future queens in late summer. So at this stage, you may also start to see males present in the nest, or you may also get indications of the first, what will become future queens. So this would be sort of September into late September. And then mid-October, sort of mid-autumn, is when those males and queens, future queens, or also called gynns, will leave the nest, and they will mate. So what's fascinating as well is that the males leave the nest typically about 10 days before the future gynns do, and it's because it takes them a further 10 days to become reproductively, or for the reproductive organs to become fully mature, and at which point the gynns leave the nest. So this perfectly synchronized emergence time. So this happens in mid-autumn, October. And then in early winter, all the males die off. They don't live for very long. They're only good for one thing, really. It's just for mating. And all the workers die off. There's no need to maintain the colony anymore, because mating has occurred. There's going to be new queens hibernating through the winter and setting up their own nests the following year. So at this stage, you might see, had nests, for example, not been found, you might see large, big abandoned nests at the top of trees. The outer envelope, it's like this paper mache structure. I'll show you in a minute. You can usually see it blown off in the middle of winter, and you see all the combs exposed. But these are totally empty. So it's true of our native social wasps as well, that coming into winter, the nests are typically totally abandoned because all the workers and males have died. And so what's fascinating about having the nests that were delivered to the museum is that you can use them and analyze them to see at which point in the colony life cycle your nest has been intercepted at. So you can gather evidence from the nest about the colony demographics, which are important when it comes to figuring out what sort of controls may or may not be needed the following year, and was the response successful. So that's exactly what we did for the Cork nest. So this is the Cork City nest with the outer envelope removed to show the combs inside. It was a big nest. It was about 60 centimeters top to bottom, about the same in diameter. It had a volume equivalent to about 34 liters. It had 7 very large combs inside it, all containing brood at various life stages. Dissected out then, this is what the nest looks like. So these are the 7 combs I talked about. So going from left to right is comb number 1. This would be at the top of the nest pointing down. And then comb number 7 is way over on the right, the small one. The hornets typically build out and down as they go. So comb 1 would be the first and oldest layer of comb in the nest. It has this lovely regular brood pattern that you can see. So the queen starts laying eggs in the center of a comb, and she moves out in a sort of concentric circular pattern, and it gives rise to this lovely ring pattern. So you can see that in the middle, the kind of darker patches. This is sections where either the larvae have failed and died, or the brood has failed, or they have been successful and adult hornets have actually emerged out of this section. So the white bits are cocoons or larvae that are still covered. And from these nests, you can study them basically to get an estimate of the colony size. So how big were the nests? What was the population like? But also more importantly, from a control point of view, you get a good sense of the colony demographics. So were these nests starting to produce gynes? Were they starting to produce males and so on? So that's a very important thing to study. And I think this is just a slide. Did I skip one by mistake? Yeah, sorry. This is just a slide comparing the Cork City nest on the left to the Cove nest in the middle there. You can see, and they're on the same scale, so you can just see how huge the Cork City nest was. I know John showed pictures of it around 19, 20 meters up a tree. And it's much bigger than the Cove nest. What's crucial is that both of these nests were controlled at the end of summer, so late August, very early September. Both nests were found within a few days of each other and controlled then. So you would expect that this is still too early for males and gynes to have been produced, but this is what you need to analyze and examine in much greater detail. And so that's what was done. So I will say from both nests, the Cork City nest and the Cove nest, hundreds of pupae were opened up and hundreds of tenorals. So these are adults that are about to emerge. They were examined. No adult males were found. No future gynes were found. So that's great. It means we know that we caught the nest before they had reproduced or before they had released reproductively viable hornets that would, for example, give rise to new nests next year. More evidence to this. So this is comb 2 from the Cork nest. You can see this image on the right is from a paper by some Galician colleagues in Spain that I was in contact with. So they did a big meta-analysis of hundreds of nests from the north of Spain, which is a very terribly invaded region. And what they found, it's a recent study, only from a couple of years ago, but they found that you can, at the later stages of the nest development, you can differentiate which cells will give rise to future queens, males and workers, which is fascinating. So just for orientation, the cells that are shown with the yellow dots on them, the big obvious kind of ones, they'll give rise to gynes, and the small little flush ones that are covered in a blue dot, they'll give rise to males. The red ones will give rise to workers. So as I said, we didn't find any males or future gynes or future queens in the nests, but also we didn't see any signs of this differentiation at all, which is brilliant because it tells us that not only were there no males or future queens present in the nest, but it wasn't even close to mass producing the reproductive stage of the hornet. So it's a great job that it was caught in time. So just to summarize briefly, the Cork City nest was really big. It had between 9,000 and 10,000 individuals in the colony. Cove nest was not tiny, but had 2,000 individuals, tiny in comparison to the Cork one. Males weren't present in either nest. Gynes weren't present in either nest. And we didn't see any cell differentiation to indicate at all that they were going to produce these reproductively viable stages. So just to summarize again, so both nests, by all evidence, were successfully controlled before reproduction could occur, which is brilliant. To say as well, loads and loads of specimens were removed as part of the nest dissection and are now stored in the National Museum for future DNA work, which will be brilliant to do. So somebody, when the research is done, we'll get more information about the first Irish colonies and their biology. And just to end, to reiterate John's point of how important citizen science and reporting is to kickstart the response like this, which was so successful. To stay vigilant and log any records with invasives.ie. And thank you all for tuning in, and thanks Rachel for organising today. I'll stop sharing screen now.
Thanks, Aidan. I would just ask that all our presenters please turn on your camera and your microphones. I will just go into the Q&A. So if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A section now. I suppose just first of all, thank you for going through the ecology biology of the Asian hornet. I think it's really important that people understand when they're going to see it, or when they potentially see it, should I say, and what it actually looks like. And again, the response to the nest in Cork as well is really important. So we had a lot of questions come in beforehand. So hopefully a lot of them would have been answered ahead of time. But I suppose just looking forward, what is the plan going forward for tackling potential future incursions of the Asian hornet? John, I might pass it over to yourself to begin.
Yes. I think it's fair to say that we do expect there will be more incursions of this species. It is spreading more and more across the European Union. It's spreading. It's also now present in Georgia, USA. So it is spreading in the United States as well. So we do expect there to be more incursions. What we're going to do next is we're going to be reviewing what worked really well during the 2025 incursion and how we want to improve Ireland's preparedness to deal with this species again and again. Here at the National Biodiversity Data Centre, we're going to be promoting awareness of this species on a regular basis each and every year, particularly when people may see an emerging primary nest, but we will also focus in on raising awareness of the species when the secondary nests are probably present. And really, it's about building capability and ensuring that capability is ready to respond each and every year. Onla, you might have some thoughts as well, just to put you on the spot. I love putting people on the spot.
Thanks, John. No, I would just reiterate what John has said about this, and Aidan as well, about the citizen science. We had a very successful operation. We've controlled both nests in time, and there's no evidence of any activity other than, as Aidan said, the gynns there was no evidence of queens emerging. I suppose it all comes back down to that incident in that first sighting, that somebody saw the Asian hornet, recognized it as something that shouldn't be here, was able to take a photograph and knew to send it into invasives.ie. And that is absolutely key, because we can only deal with the Asian hornet and deal with the nest when we know it's there. And so, to be perfectly frank, I think that is probably the most important, most crucial part of the operation, is that people are aware what they see and report it. Take a picture, report it, send it into invasives. Even if you're not sure what it is, better to send it in and have NBDC have a look at it and come back and confirm that it's okay, it's a wasp or whatever. But better to have it sent in than to not, because it comes back down to reporting, public awareness. Look, see what you're seeing, send us a picture.
Yeah, I think that's a very clear message of reporting is key when it comes to kind of any invasive species, really. We're getting a lot of questions now, actually, maybe just about the biology of the Asian hornet. So Aidan, I might just have a few questions for you. So people were just wondering, I suppose, how does the Asian hornet reproduce? Does it need a male from another nest, or can a queen mate with her son? And then also there's kind of a question around, can they basically switch genders to be able to reproduce if there's lack of viable reproductive offspring?
So in its native range in Asia, you would get the European population of the Asian hornet it's incredibly inbred. So as John pointed out, as far as we know, every single Asian hornet across Europe derives from this one queen that was introduced 21 years ago. So that's a huge bottleneck, and in some ways it makes them kind of predictable, and it often leads to colony failures and so on. Having said that, when nests start releasing males and future gynns, the aim is in nature that they will mate with the opposite sex from other nests that are around the area, and that they'll kind of all emerge around the same time. That's why they have this predictable life cycle where at certain times of the year you kind of know what stage the colony is at. So in its native range in Asia, where it's not as inbred as it is in Europe, this isn't a problem. I don't know. I think that the Asian hornet probably would have been further inbred if that Cork City nest hadn't been found in time. That's certainly the evidence from Europe, and it's why they can spread so quickly, and it's why it's so important to control them in time. But it's not the normal for the species in its native range, but it's one of the things that leads it to be such a successful invader, I think.
Okay, perfect. And another question came in. Do hornets leave the primary nest to the secondary nest like a small swarm, or is it something that people can look out? Can they report swarms rather than individuals?
I don't know. Would you see a swarm of hornets? I don't know how.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
there's no evidence of swarms like what you would see with honeybees. So you really won't see a swarm of hornets in that, because they will usually abandon their primary nest when it's a very, very small nest, and then if they're going to relocate, it'll be a small number of individuals. They can have a period where the primary nest is still alive while the secondary nest is being built, and so there is a little bit of overlap, but it won't be in a swarm. So members of the public are not likely to ever see a swarm of hornets.
Perfect. There was a lot of questions beforehand, and we're getting some now about, I suppose, what are the pathways into Ireland?
Would you like
John,
me to take that one?
Yeah, I think so. That'd be great. Thank you.
As the species spreads more and more across Europe, there's a growing number of potential pathways of introduction into Ireland. It's that simple. So you do have the likelihood of it coming in on goods, HGVs imported, potentially garden supplies, potentially wooden products, potentially even maybe potentially stowaway on people's vehicles coming in off the continent. We don't believe that there's a very, very high risk of natural spread from the continent, because Ireland is pretty far away from the continent. So it will be through trade pathways. So we do expect there to be incursions along trade pathways, and that has been the case explored or experienced in Europe, where the species spreads along motorways, so where vehicles and trade pathways are, and also in the south of England, where they've been able to go, it's connected to the Eurostar or other trade pathways as well.
And John, just on that, could you talk about the contingency plan?
In what regard? Sorry.
Just in development, there was a few questions of, is there a contingency plan in development?
Yes, there is a contingency plan in development, and it's very much going to be reviewed based on the lessons that we've learned this year as well. And there is a contingency plan very much in development that will set the strategy for the long term for this species.
I see we have a lot of people asking, how do they protect their hives and what monitoring can they do? So it's great to see people are really, eager and interested. So I suppose, John, maybe I'll open up to both of you. Like, what would you say to people that are interested in monitoring or looking out for the Asian hornet?
First of all, so how do you protect your hive? Well, one, we don't believe that there's any population of Asian hornet in Ireland right now. We have no evidence of Asian hornet being in Ireland. So the thing about protecting your hive is to continue to raise awareness of the species. Talk to your friends and your families, and share on your networks as well. Talk about the species, so that if it does turn up, people will report it to us here at the data centre, and then we can work with Onla's team at National Parks and Wildlife Service to ensure there's a response. And that's going to be the message. If any beekeeper thinks that Asian hornet is in the area, please report it to us, and that will avoid the need to install anything to protect your hive. That is your protection, engaging with us. Sorry, was there another part of that question that I've forgotten, Rachel?
No, I think that's fine. Actually, just about the reporting, John, quickly, could you say kind of the timeline on reporting? What happens when people submit a record, rather to us through the app or other means?
Yeah, so here at the National Biodiversity Data Centre, we have a number of species that sit on our alert list, and Asian hornet is one of those species. So if anybody reported Asian hornet to us, it triggers an alert. And over the last number of weeks, we have got hundreds of reports of people, what they mistake to be Asian hornets. Now, we do not discourage anybody reporting something, because our expert team here at the data center, working with people like Aidan and working with colleagues from NPWS, can go, no, that's not Asian hornet. We don't need to worry about that. We ask people to report when they see nests as well, so that we can also look at those nests and go, yeah, we believe that that is a wasp nest and not an Asian hornet nest. And that system, it happens pretty quickly. The email alert triggers, it actually comes to my inbox and a number of other inboxes as well, and then we triage them. And then very, very quickly we respond to anybody who has submitted a photograph of Asian hornet, or we put them on going, please come back with more evidence, or we go, no, we've identified what you've sent and it is not Asian hornet and we're satisfied, but thank you very much. And that's how the process works, and it's working really well right now.
Thanks, John.
I would just reiterate that vigilance. Have a look, report what you see.
We're actually getting some questions about kind of communication. So there's one that's coming there. Is there a plan to inform agricultural gardeners and council workers and contractors about what to do if they disturb an Asian hornet nest?
Is there a plan to inform? I suppose that would be part of the, as you said, the protocol that's being developed, that there will be, you know, a whole series of information, who needs to know, and you know, generally the public need to be informed, but also there will, I would imagine this will come out as part of some more strategic awareness campaign, specifically to things like garden centres and so on.
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions, or a few questions that came in beforehand as well, was, is there an awareness campaign or engagement campaign? So that's all part of the larger contingency plan as well. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through the questions. There's been some questions from beekeepers, just about what they can do. So I actually just have a little bit about the Sentinel apiary hives as well. But John, I'll just post that in, but is there anything that you would like to add about beekeepers and their involvement?
Beekeepers are going to be essential to a strategic response to Asian hornet. I think that's fair to say, because I believe there are about 6,000 beekeepers around Ireland. So that's a lot of people all over the island of Ireland. So there's a lot of potentials for you and your neighbours to actually go, right, is that actually an Asian hornet? And support people in your community who live nearby, and support your family members to report to us. That is going to be the essential thing that we need everyone to do. Report any suspected Asian hornet to us, and that's going to be it. And we will work through the beekeeping associations to raise awareness of the species and respond accordingly. And with that, we can keep the species out of Ireland.
Yeah, and I've just shared through the Q&A there a little bit more information about DAFM and the Sentinel apiary program. So if any beekeepers here are interested in taking part in that, then there's an email included there as well. So the question came in just saying the swatches are a great resource. Are there any for invasive species, those ID features such as outlined? So we do have an invasive species booklet, but I don't know if the Asian hornet's in it, John, because it's a newer incursion.
We have an Asian hornet flyer, so the intention is that this will be printed. So if let's say, for example, that there's a record of Asian hornet, then this flyer can be printed and then put up locally. People can download that from our website as well. And yeah, over the next few months, I think we will review what ID material we can produce and share through our website as well. So I think, Rachel, there will be more coming on supporting people to identify this species.
Yeah, and I've just put a link into one of the questions that goes to invasives.ie. So if you go on invasives.ie and you can go into the search bar and put in Asian hornet, first of all, you'll see kind of the live response. So that's a continuously updated status of the response to the Asian hornet. And then there's a series of resources linked as well. So identification ones, looking at your commonly misidentified insects, or that could be misidentified with the Asian hornet as well. So that's a really nice area to be able to go and get kind of a bundle of resources in one area. But as John said, there's definitely more to come. Just looking through the questions. Okay, there's another one, Aidan, about just about when you're likely to see the Asian hornet, or about its ecology. So when is the mated guy most likely to disperse the furthest? In spring after overwintering, when the traps monitoring stations are more active and effective, forage is scarce and weather conditions are harshest, or do they disperse furthest in autumn after mating?
I don't know how far they go after mating. I think that's possibly something John may have come across. I know they don't disperse, like, so after they're overwintering, they usually set up a nest near where they've overwintered anyway.
So what I can say is if Asian hornets were out there right now, they're potentially reproducing. Sorry, even though I do not believe there's any evidence of Asian hornet being out there in Ireland right now. So I just got to be very important of that. But setting up traps now to track or to capture any dispersing mated gynns or is proven to be ineffective in Britain. So at this time of year, they've never caught any mated gynns at this time of year that I'm aware of. So somebody, if there's somebody from Britain on the call, or on the thing, they might come back and go, actually, that's not the case. But the experts I've talked to, they've never caught any mated gynns this time of year. What would happen is usually, so as Aidan described, the males would leave the nest. 10 days later, the females would leave the nest. They would mate, and then the mated queens would probably go back to the nest because it's a nice, warm, safe space. And then once the temperatures start to drop and the nest starts to break down, then they will try to find a place to hibernate over the winter. That could be in something that's moved a long distance, or it could be very, very nearby in the nearby to the parent nest. As Aidan suggested, the vast majority of individuals do locate close to the main nest. A very, very small number can move further, but there's no science behind it, because tracking a single individual and what they do is very, very difficult. Does that answer that question as clear as I can make it?
We have a question coming in about the genetics. So Aidan, are you aware of the genetics of what region the Asian hornet came from the Cork nest at this point?
The genetics haven't been completed yet. Yeah, so the samples are all prepared and it's in train, but it hasn't been completed yet.
Perfect, thank you. How long does it take for the primary and secondary nest to be built? John, hand it over.
The primary nest will be, the queen will emerge and she'll start building the primary nest very, very quickly. I would guess in a period of weeks. So she'll start to build her nest in kind of April/May. So you are talking 2 to 3 weeks for that small initial stage, and then she'll start building that nest up a little bit bigger, and then eventually she will grow. You are talking weeks. It's not a period of days. Aidan's probably also can talk a bit more about the life cycle there.
No, that's it. I wouldn't have anything to add from that to that. Yeah, they come out sort of early to mid-spring, build an embryo nest, and then eventually the workers take over. But yeah, weeks.
Weeks, yeah. Perfect. Sorry, I know that we lost Anna. She just messaged me saying that she is here, but I can't seem to add her back in as a presenter, but she is here, so hopefully she might be able to answer some of the questions if they get published. So we do have time for a few more questions. I just want to make sure that we do wrap up at 12, because again, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. So I suppose looking towards, I know we talked about the future planning, John, but I suppose specifically looking towards spring next year. I
Yes.
suppose what will, you know, what's the preparedness for potential for next year?
So very much so here at the data center, I'm working with NPWS. I wish Onla was able to answer this question. We're going to take a very risk-based approach. So Aidan has dissected the 2 nests and has identified that there's no evidence of breeding, that there's no likelihood that either of these 2 nests will produce offspring that could lead to future Asian hornets in the area. So we're back to a situation that any incursions into Ireland will be via trade. And as we all know, trade is right across the island of Ireland. So we are going to maintain public awareness of the species and maintain readiness to respond if this species turns up on our shores again. And that's basically it. We're just going to be maintaining a state of readiness for 2026 because there's no point in trapping what's not there. There's no way that people could predict where Asian hornet will definitely turn up, so that a small trap could set up an effective biosecurity measure for this particular species, and that's something that we're aware of.
Perfect. I think Ola might have joined us again as a presenter.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Apologies, it's isn't it wonderful when the technology supports you? My mic is back on, but my camera is not. I suppose to reiterate what John was saying, we are going to develop a protocol for dealing with the next incursion, and it's a when, not an if, as John is saying. And I think our plan is to actually involve some of the beekeeper representative groups in that protocol to make sure that everybody is aware of what it is, so that we can make sure it's all about information. It's all about people knowing that what's happening and knowing that something is being, that NPWS and NBDC are actually taking control of the situation. But like I said, once it's developed, we will be sharing it with stakeholders so that everybody is on point and aware of what the plan is for the next incursion, if and when probably it comes.
Perfect. Just looking at the time, we're just coming up to 12, so we might just wrap up. I'm sorry that we couldn't get through all the questions. It's great to see so much interest in it. You can always go on to invasives.ie and find out more about the Asian hornet as well. So as mentioned, we have identification guides there, and we also have a kind of a rolling update as well around the incursions that are coming through. I'd just like to say, firstly, thank you to John, Aidan and Anna for joining us today. It's been fantastic learning more about the Asian hornet, and just thank you everyone who attended as well, taking time out of your Saturday morning. We really appreciate it. So this recording will be made available on our website and YouTube probably sometime mid next week. But if you have any questions, please visit invasives.ie. And thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you everyone as well.